Hello everyone, thank you for joining today's workshop. NUS Fintech Month is an annual flagship event organized by NUS Fintech Society to prepare the next generation of business leaders, entrepreneurs, developers, and other professionals to develop and apply new financial technologies and business practices, both now and well into the future. So with that, we have prepared a series of workshops, panel discussions, and a hackathon. So in today's workshop, we are happy to have Calvin, who is a core builder at Impossible Finance, a multi-chain decentralized incubator, Launchpad, and Swap. So he previously worked on research and diligence for Binance Launchpad and built up the Binance staking product to support 30 different blockchains. So with the previous experience working at Binance, particularly its Launchpad and staking services, Calvin will be talking more on all things tokens and Launchpad. So Calvin, please.
Yeah. Hey guys, thanks for having me. Really appreciate everyone taking time out of their busy days to chime in, and really glad that you guys are doing this FinTech month and having a lot of awesome speakers. Hopefully I won't disappoint with some of the other ones that I saw you guys have. I think really honored to be a part of this as well. And without further ado, would love to maybe dive in. I probably won't go exactly off the script of everything on the deck. And I think we talked a little bit about this earlier of if we'll have time for Q&A or anything. So I want to keep this relatively more casual and flexible to see however we can help give you guys a bit more of an insight of what we do within the space of crypto and what we work on a day-to-day, as well as kind of see if we can share any relevant insights for any of you if you are thinking about building some of your own startups or looking to join startups within the sector as well. Would love to chat more on that as well. So I think thanks, Yeso, for the great intro. I guess enough about me. I guess the more interesting thing I think that you guys want to hear about is about all the token side of things. And I think it's kind of goes back to actually when I was in university, I'll be honest, and I was the kid that sat in the back row that wasn't paying attention to most of my classes. I was actually reading and trading cryptos and not really paying attention. And don't be like me there on this front. But in terms of all of the stuff that I was able to really try to learn and read, I think that the beautiful thing about this blockchain space as a whole is that you see so much that is fully on chain, right? That anyone with Google can search for a lot of different things. And that's unfortunately not the case with a lot of private companies or other things in the real world where you may not have access to all the information about the revenues or other statistics that a certain company in the real world has. Whereas in crypto, I think a lot of stuff you really can spend the time to really try to learn. And I think that's both a dual-edged sword as well, that when you have a token, it's not like a private company where you have shareholders that you don't really have to disclose everything that you do. When we do any kind of dealings or when we talk with the community can monitor every single one of the wallets that we have. And they're like, hey, Calvin, why'd you move this? Or what happened to this, right? They can bug us with every one of these questions. And I think that's some of why I feel very confident that in the long run, a lot of these on-chain technologies force us to be the best version of ourselves, to be able to really always be ready to kind of answer at anyone's kind of question, because the barrier to entry to doing a quote unquote audit or having someone be like, hey, what happened with this funds is a lot lower. You don't have to be a traditional finance firm to check whether or not this due diligence can be done. And that's something that I think is really powerful. By having this type of transparency, it also, I think, will kind of touch on a lot of these types of aspects of actually operating, something in crypto for us. Maybe not everyone in the room is familiar with quote unquote what a launchpad is. And I guess, most of you guys are probably familiar with incubators like the Y Combinators of the world. For us, we do the same thing, but with a specific focus of only crypto projects. And I think not everyone kind of thinks about it from actually trying to incubate or support projects, but rather some people think that launchpads are just token offering platforms. So all they do is like, you dump a token on there and then voila, everything's done. But actually most of the work that we do, I would say, is actually behind the scenes. It's a lot of the kind of incubation and advisory work that we take on for all projects. And then in the future, obviously, we do hope to see even more projects be built within the space, whether it is, and we want to move beyond like a point in time where I think a lot of people in this space still use a lot of buzzwords in crypto. 4 years ago, people's white papers all had, AI and machine learning and whatever, right? Just to try and put as many buzzwords in. Now you feel like Web3, sometimes you just see people slap Web3 in front of everything and then just call it a day, right? But for us, I think there's actually some really valuable takeaways I would say would love to share in terms of our experience and really spending time, not just trying to solve our own business pain points, but also working with all the projects that we incubate. And how decentralization often plays a part in some of the power and the evolution of every one of the projects in this space, how they kind of grow. So yeah, we'll definitely dive a bit more into that. I guess just wanted to check in, Yeso, how much time do you guys want to queue me on anything once we get closer to any of the points that you want us to move forward?
I think you can take enough time until 9 p.m.
Okay, great. Then hopefully I won't take the full time and we'll have a bit more time to discuss about things or answer any questions from the audience today. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I guess, I think, does Zoom have like a hand raising feature or something that people can like answer a poll, or maybe in chat? Is there a chat? I guess, how many of you guys have heard of NFTs? I assume most of you guys have already heard of this, but would love to see if there's a way I can see like a show of hands or something. Maybe in chat. I see an excited I have from Adrian. Thank you, Adrian, for breaking the ice on the first person to answer me. But I guess, how many of you guys have, maybe say yes or something in the chat if you have heard of NFTs? Thanks, Jin, Leonard, Edison, Alicia, Jiawei, thank you. Yeah, I guess the flip side is the brave question is, who hasn't heard of NFTs? Feel free to jump in with a no. If there's no no's, I'll just assume that everyone's heard of NFTs. So obviously, in when you normally take like money, right? If you have a $1 bill or a $10 bill or something like that, it doesn't matter which bill you have, right? Whereas a non-fungible token, in every single individual one is unique, kind of like a trading card or something. They're all of the same type, maybe, but they have specific attributes. Like a trading card is of a specific player or a specific character in a game or whatever it might be, right? And so they're all the same class, but have different characteristics. Whereas when you have a $10 bill versus another $10 bill, they're all worth the same. There's no differences between the two. Sure, there might be like a serial number or something. And for me in Hong Kong right now, one thing that's kind of crazy for me is that actually the individual banks can issue different bills. So like some are from like Standard Chartered, some are from HSBC. So they have different designs and stuff. So they look like they're non-fungible, but obviously people use them on a day-to-day as fully, $100 Hong Kong dollar bills, right? And I think that's kind of the beauty of us going in a more kind of digital world, that we've been able to represent a lot of these same types of tokens and values as digital units on chain. You can obviously have something fully divisible. I think a lot of folks in the early days, when they first hear about Bitcoin or ETH, they don't know that they can buy like a fraction of something, because in the real world, most of the kind of accounting systems that we have are designed to hold whole shares of things, right? And it's just from a tech perspective, being able to have this type of granularity allows for a lot of different things in the future, I would say, whether that's micropayments or fractional ownership. Every single employee at Impossible has some part of our Impossible token supply. And I think that's really beautiful when you have, a startup that you can really easily show people, on your team that they should have some sort of ownership in what they're building, that they can look on a balance in their wallet and not just some sort of agreement written in some sort of archaic language to say, yes, you are a part of owning this ecosystem that you're building. I think that's a really powerful thing. And on the flip side, by being able to encourage regular people who, maybe you've never met, who also hold your token, to be able to think about things and work with each other in ways that I don't think we've ever really seen before. When you take a look at like a stock, right? I guess maybe it's interactive question number 2. How many of you guys hold stocks yourselves? Respond with a yes in the chat if any of you hold any stocks yourselves. Okay, we've got a few yeses. So I guess, have you ever talked to some other shareholder of the stock that you have to try and influence like some business decision for that stock? Have you ever been quote unquote active in that sense? Say a no if you haven't on this aspect. Yep. So that's 3 yeses from the previous question and 3 no's from the other one. And I think that's the beauty of what we're building in crypto, that there are a lot of folks around the world that have simply never met each other or, even crossed paths in any way. They could be from all walks of life doing whatever. But that if they hold a token and they now have an internet forum in which they can communicate with others, whether that's a Discord, Telegram, Twitter, whatever it might be, they can go and influence the direction of a lot of these if they're truly decentralized projects, right? And so I think the cool thing about being able to unite people around the world is really expanding beyond what you can even do as a regular person, in terms of networking, in terms of growth of an ecosystem. And obviously you guys have all seen, the growth of different social networks as users yourselves. But I think something that supercharges a lot of what crypto has to offer, and sometimes the risk of it kind of becoming a little bit too bubbly or too trendish, is that people have money attached to both their feelings and their synergies of what they want to build in terms of their network. And obviously that's a very potent combination. It's one that is like, with power comes responsibility. And so for us, when we build, our own platforms, we have to think a lot about what will happen in us opening our platform out to the users around the world. I was in Thailand 4 months ago at a hackathon, and then one of the kids actually came up to me and said, "You're the platform where I made my money to quit school." And that was just the most mind-blowing thing that I've ever heard as a sentence from a random stranger that I'd never met. But the kid said, "Your platform was a platform where I made my first investment into crypto and then started, making some money, and therefore felt comfortable to try and build my own startup and drop out." And that was something that I was like, holy shit, we've done something that I didn't realize I would ever end up having this level of impact. But, obviously that's also a lot of power and responsibility. I think when you create something that ends up having, a truly open ecosystem to let people participate in, that will be something that's also sometimes a burden. But I think for me as a builder, that's what gets me excited to kind of create what we do at Impossible today. So a lot of the work that we help with project teams is tokenomic design. Obviously, every kind of project or ecosystem may want to have a unit of account inside that ecosystem. In the real world, right? Obviously, that's why you have a Sing dollar instead of using some other unit of account. You want something that measures specifically this local economy, right? And in the crypto world, it's no different. There's obviously a lot of different use cases to be able to use tokens, some more useful than others. Obviously, if your token is more similar to be able to be used in many, many different formats, then obviously it should have more utility and it should have more value. But that obviously the features that are provided differ on each kind of token. And that's something that I'm happy to dive a bit more deeper later into. But obviously how are tokens even created in the first place? often they represent something similar to a share or some sort of holdings of any of these projects that may exist out there. And for me, how I personally got into this space as well as I actually interned at a equity crowdfunding platform called Republic. Maybe some of you guys are familiar with a platform called AngelList. It's actually from the same umbrella or Product Hunt as well. I was just an intern there when I was in university, and then tried to dive a bit deeper into this like early stage investment kind of side of the world, because I had obviously heard about things from my various case competitions and stuff of doing things like, you know, investing in Uber or whatever it might be, right? And I was like, too many people don't actually have any chance to invest because I have no clue how to invest. And I was in every single one of these types of fintech clubs when I was in uni. And I was like, there's no way, maybe for Americans, we also have some more, I would say, restrictions on investment for accredited investors and things like this. I think for you guys, hopefully it's not so bad. But that the access to be able to make investments into early stage projects was something that mattered a lot to me when I first kind of joined the space. And it was something that I'm really glad that looking back after, I guess this is now year 6 of me in crypto, that, you know, hopefully we'll be able to do even more in helping open the opportunities for people to invest in projects, and at the same time solve this question on the board here of how our tokens launch. Really work with project teams and be their advisor in helping see every one of these aspects kind of start, just because we've obviously done it quite a bit already in our past platforms, and then now at Impossible as well. That it's something that you know, we've kind of seen a bit of the playbook of how many different platforms launch, and projects launch, and what platforms they use. So there's a bit of alphabet soup here. And I think the one scary thing that I always realize within crypto and any industry, I think, is that we love to use acronyms because then we get to talk more quickly, but also it kind of signals that we know what we're talking about sometimes. And some people, I think, abuse this a bit. So I do want to first ask if anyone isn't familiar with the phrases of ICOs, IEOs, or IDOs. I'll definitely go a little bit deeper into each one, but I guess the three are initial coin offerings, initial exchange offerings, and initial DEX offerings, or decentralized offerings. So this slide is a bit about both, and I think something that you know, it always is a work in kind of progress is like, we don't know what will be the next types of versions of launching to in all honesty, but that these were the kind of 3 stages that I think were most similar to something that I would say most projects have done. The ICO wave, I think, started in maybe 2017 or I would argue 2017 was the major year for ICOs, in which regular people could use the transparency of blockchain to just simply put up a collection address to raise funds and then offer out tokens to people that paid into effectively what were no more fancy than a fundraiser. And often, as you guys have seen in regular fundraisers, maybe for your clubs or other initiatives, right? It's just kind of like you manually trying to reach out your network still, right? And try and get as many people to be interested and buy things. And that obviously this model was very popular in 2017 because a lot of people were able to make some money. But once market conditions weren't so good, the ICO wave kind of disappeared for 2018, 2019 and beyond. At the same time, a lot of the centralized exchanges, obviously you guys have seen a lot in the news about FTX and other platforms as well. But I would say that the centralized exchange kind of wave really pushed on when Binance actually did its own ICO, and then eventually became the largest trading volume exchange out there. And so back in 2018, when I arrived at Binance, a lot of what I wanted to do was going back to these early stage investment side of things. I think for me, maybe I'm just maybe more risk seeking than the average Singaporean maybe, but for me, it wasn't interesting for me to try and study things like treasury bonds and stuff in my finance classes and things like that, because for me, I'm not scale. Like my personal net wealth and any of my family or friends' net wealth will never be the size of what sovereign wealth funds or other people care about and trying to earn an extra percent higher than inflation. That's not a game that really matters. What matters is that, if my uni in the US costs a few $100,000 after my 4 years of education, I need to figure out ways to make money. That was the blunt part of it, right? And so for me, in trying to kind of understand more of the space and seek to understand, what was happening when people were launching projects, I understood right away that when I tried to buy a bunch of the tokens on Binance myself, I actually lost a shit ton of money. I think I probably traded at one point, I made 20 something X in just trading, and then I lost all of it like within 2 weeks. I think in January of 2018. It was pretty insane, just the level of volatility and the level of risk that people in the space sometimes kind of face when they're not armed with all of the knowledge that they should have, right? And I think that was something that as an exchange after joining, I went to Binance because I said, hey, look, I was a user on your platform. I couldn't find a job after graduation. So I ended up graduating a year early. So a lot of the normal recruiting processes, which I'm sure you guys are faced with now, didn't have any plans for people that graduate from American universities in 3 years. So I basically was like, okay, I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to throw my resume at every platform that I had used as a user and say, hey, I'm a user. I want to help you help other users. And that was my pitch to Binance. And somehow it got me into the research team where we handled a lot of the listing due diligence for things like the Launchpad, as well as the obviously regular exchange side of things. And it was from that kind of end user pain point side of things myself, knowing that I had bought a bunch of things on the exchange that went to zero and lost money on them. And I was like, I don't want that feeling to ever happen to other people because of the platform having not done enough due diligence. And that was kind of the wave of when we were able to help kind of, I would say, push this like mindset of IEOs. So the Binance product was called the Binance Launchpad, which is, I would say, why this sector is called Launchpads today. That the Binance Launchpad allowed for project teams to be able to launch and sell their tokens to the platform, which at that time we were in the tens of millions of users. It is obviously much more scalable than just posting a link and trying to get people to donate money into some sort of random stranger's address, right? And that for us, we obviously had the exchange so that then assets that fundraise via us would obviously also clear the bar to be able to be listed and traded publicly on our platform as well. So something that I would say the IEO stage really happened to give project teams was scale. But maybe what it didn't really do was really make sure that these users were relevant for some of the startups or projects that were fundraising to the community, right? So if I was to start a fintech club, right, I obviously need to get people that are actually interested in fintech. But there's also a lot of people that are interested in fintech, maybe because of the other reasons. Like I also said myself, how I first got into crypto was because I was like, I just want to figure out ways to pay off my student loans and costs, right? It was a very money-driven decision to try and better understand the space as a student, right? But I think that's also the dangers of a platform that can scale beyond maybe people that are just in it for the right reasons. It can also be people that are in it purely for the speculative reasons. And I do think that was kind of the shift that we're still, I think, in the process of. I'm not going to bullshit and say that there's no speculation in crypto. I think absolutely there still is a lot. But that in terms of the IDOs today, one of the most, I think, relevant things is that crypto projects need crypto users. Maybe interactive question number 3. Do any of you guys have a wallet yourselves, or like a MetaMask, Trust Wallet, or any of these apps or extensions? Can you respond to yes really quickly in the chat as well? For us, I think one of the things that is quite interesting is that a lot of the projects that we work with, or teams that we work with, they need users that need to have a wallet. But that if you're selling tokens to people that don't even have a wallet, I think it's very hard to convince that person to convince them to do all of these different things to use your product, right? And I think there's something beautiful about getting people that use your product to buy your product, right? You see this with a lot of maybe phrases or things that you've maybe seen in other worlds, like attention economy, maybe as a phrase of like these like, creators that are able to have some sort of like kind of collaborations or value created from doing brand engagements or other things, which they are maybe users are also sponsors of or spokespeople for, right? And I think that that's something that aligns some interests in some way, because the person, when they make, your YouTube or TikTok video, they say they really love this thing because they are actually a really real user, and eventually they try to own a piece of that, whatever it might be, right? I think that's kind of just better targeted advertising than maybe, Google Ads might be something that gets you more raw number of users, right? But maybe somebody that is like, I create makeup tutorials, and if I show a makeup thing, people are going to buy it more likely, right? Per head. The probability that someone converts into a real user is obviously much higher. And I think that's kind of the challenge that we ourselves as a decentralized platform are trying to do more of in helping these other decentralized products find their users. So I'd say stage one was openness. ICOs were just open. It didn't matter where you were, what country you were from, you could participate. IEOs were to scale that so that then you had a more systematic approach where a project team maybe had an easier time in being able to find new users directly from a platform rather than just posting something themselves. And now we're taking that to, I would say, the next logical step of trying to find more targeted users systematically for all the project teams that launch with us. So that's a bit on the evolution of Launchpads. I'll pause there real quick just to see if there are any questions first. You guys can feel free to ask in the chat. I guess you guys can start prepping some questions, as I realize you guys can't type instantaneously. So yeah, feel free to start throwing some questions in the chat as well. Obviously, there are a lot of platforms out there. There's some that I would characterize as centralized exchanges. So something like a Binance, obviously, or Bybit would have their own platforms. And then there are a lot of decentralized teams that I would say have a platform. Personally, a lot of people normally would look at this page as a competitor's page. But we actually never really say any of them are competitors, because I do think that what we do is both different from what they do, and also that we actually also oftentimes co-launch with other platforms. Maybe you guys have seen this in traditional worlds where sometimes a banking IPO deal might actually be shared between multiple banks or multiple firms. A deal might be led in a VC role with multiple project teams. And we kind of see ourselves in the same way, that if we're doing things the right way, we're not going to be monolithic. We're able to actually coexist with a lot of the other platforms out there. So I think we've actually done, 3 or 4 sales with Bybit. And for us, we kind of actually win in the process of doing so, because Bybit spent $200 million on the Formula One sponsorship for Red Bull. And to know that some of the projects that we've incubated can get access into that type of audience or user base because they've spent the money already, I think it's a win-win for us, even though in some way we're kind of launching with somebody else that is in our same sector. And that's something I think that is also the beauty of it, that by being able to work with some of the other players on this page, you'll kind of know the difference in quality between some of these different platforms. The ones that kind of don't have anything good enough to want to be shared or fought with other platforms, you'll notice they only have like solo launches. Whereas maybe somebody that maybe Binance is the only other exception, where when they're big enough, then they can be like, I only want my terms and I don't want to play with anyone else. But basically for everybody else, I think everybody else is willing to team up to try and get some betterment of both worlds. So when a project team maybe co-launches with an IEO on Bybit as an exchange and an IDO on Impossible, that they can tap into both the scale of users that Bybit has and maybe the quality of users that Impossible has. Yeah. So I guess this one, I think it kind of hits home for me, but I'll try to kind of keep this one relatively short, so I can hopefully answer some more questions from you guys. For us, Impossible, like I said, just as a regular trader, I lost so much money in different investments, and I wanted to make sure that the space as a whole had better opportunities for people to participate in. It's a privilege to be able to have the chance to be able to invest, but also there's a lot of burdens that come with that in making open investments out there in the world. And for us, if we can make sure that we have this high quality as well as give accesses to the best investments for everybody, not just a select few, we think that's something that is important in the scaling question of how do you get everyone around the world that's relevant to this project to be able to be a potential investor in this project. And so for us, we do use a token staking mechanism, which is one of the kind of beauties of our token, that we can kind of quantify how early you are into something, how long you've staked, how much money. We weight everything into one kind of formula to be able to say, yeah, you get to invest X into this project. And it's something that we think is kind of cool in being able to also measure a very specific fraction or decimal of holdings in any project that you might be participating in, and have some clear rules in how you can signal to the rest of the community that you are a big fan of X, or you want to bet on the thesis of Y, whatever it might be. And that's something that I would say is kind of where we may differ from some other teams that try to create some, for a lack of a better word, some predatory types of structures where they may create lottery systems, sweepstakes, a bunch of other kind of flashy things that catch people's attention. And maybe this is also where sometimes people see crypto as a scam because of some of these types of things too. And I think that's also the kind of danger that I think in looking back, as a lot of people kind of label Impossible as just a launchpad, that's probably been the hardest thing to overcome, when like you're doing something and then people say like, oh, they think of you as just this, right? So like maybe everyone thinks of Uber as a ride hailing app, but they're like, but wait, we actually have, I don't know, logistics or delivery or food, right? Or whatever it might be, right? That it's kind of always hard, I think, when you're an entrepreneur to kind of realize that what you have in your head or what you're building is actually maybe not necessarily what the users take home. And I think that's something that has been a tough lesson of really needing to make sure that you listen to the customer first, or listen to the community first, and seeing what they say, and then kind of playing off of that. So it's a bit about, I guess, some of the projects that we've helped incubate. So behind the scenes, well before a token launches, we actually do work as advisors for project teams. So maybe you guys heard about Move to Earn or some of these types of exercise types of apps, a bit like a Pokemon Go or whatever it might be, that gets just people moving, right? That some of these obviously went quite viral, and we were able to actually find one of these project teams. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 months before this kind of sector got popular. So we were able to help our users actually earn, I think at one point, this project did something like a 30 something X for within, I think, a span of like 3 months. So there are definitely some very powerful, I think, use cases of where, when we did some of our fundamental research in finding theses or trends that we thought were popular in the real world and help bring them into crypto, that we were able to actually get some pretty interesting opportunities for the users, as well as help the project teams fundraise. So GenoPets was actually one of the teams that actually co-launched with Bybit as well. And we were able to help them raise 400,000, which I think isn't a lot for them actually. But that was just something that allowed us to be able to co-launch with others, so that then there is more of the pie for other platforms as well to sell together. And that then we would be able to hopefully support the project team after launch as well. So some of the stuff that we do is some data advisory, some research analysis, helping them with some targeted marketing campaigns, whatever it might be. We've done quite a bit after the launch as well. But before the launch, some of the stuff that we do may actually be to help people design their tokenomics. So for example, GenoPets actually does have 2 tokens. It has a governance token, which allows for a lot more voting power, things within the ecosystem. And it also has an in-game currency key, which allows users that play the game to earn this token, more like an XP, if you will, right? And so we were able to help work with them in the design and planning of some of this as well. And some of this looks like we're kind of chasing a trend, but I do feel kind of happy that we found some of these projects before these trends got popular. One of the projects that we also helped launch was High Street last year, and we helped them raise $1 million from the public. They actually at peak, I believe, 42x'd from their original investment price. And part of the reason was because we helped launch them 45 days before Facebook rebranded to Meta. What we were able to do is turn a lot of our research insights of seeing on-chain activity with regards to metaverses and lands. Really, like we, I guess, saw the data before people were talking about it in the news. And so we sought to find projects and support them ahead of time before this kind of thesis became a much more popular one. So with that, High Street actually ended up becoming our first project. It was actually our fourth project overall, but it was actually our first project that got listed on Binance within, I think it was 60 days of our token launch and within 3 months of our incubation work. So that's something that I would say, looking back, a lot of it behind the scenes of it's not just as simple as a token, but really doing a lot of work on the data side, on the research side, to really know what we're talking about, so that when or if any of these types of trends pick up, we already have something in our hand, almost like Avengers, like Infinity Stones or something, right? That we've got them ready to deploy within our toolbox, if you will, and we're able to then say, yeah, that's the one that we can push. And I think it's not that different from how investment banks may have a lot of different deals at the same time. And then when maybe a certain trend or thesis is more popular, then they can say, yeah, I want to focus on this big IPO for Spotify or whatever it might be, right? And I think that's kind of how we think about it with regards to how we build our ecosystem as well. So I guess the last one is our current project. We're actually helping a project team called Pine Loans, which does NFT backed loans. Maybe you guys are familiar as well with the buy now, pay later types of startups in fintech worlds as well. The cool thing is that you can do that using NFT lending protocols, because some of what you're doing is basically putting in some sort of credit or reputation in something that's pretty non-fungible, right? My credit is very different from maybe your credit or any other people's credit. So they act a lot like NFTs, but then we're all able to somehow acquire some sort of loans or cash advances via this type of buy now, pay later types of products. So Pine actually has this for NFTs. You could actually deposit in an NFT and be able to pay for other expenditures or payments later using the NFT as collateral. I think the exact product line is called Pine Now, Pay Later. Maybe not so great of a pun, but it works. So for us, this was another type of project where, for us as an incubator or as an accelerator, something that we have to do is really go way beyond just what people see. Maybe you guys have heard of the trends of NFT or heard some things around kind of metaverses or whatever. But then the question is, do you really need a metaverse land right now for doing a lot of things? To be honest, I know Zoom's not my favorite tool, but at least I can communicate with you guys, right? That a lot of people, I think, also are maybe a little bit too extreme in some of their dreams of how big they think some different products or sectors will grow, at least in the short term. Maybe in the long term, it'll be different. But one of the things that we thought would be really cool use cases to help the projects that we have in our platform that have sold tokens on our platform, to actually find more use cases for their NFTs, which could include using them as collateral on a product like this. A lot of what we start thinking about is infrastructure that helps the project teams that we work on or work with, to be able to prepare them for as much success as we can by kind of putting together all of these things. And one of the phrases that decentralized space or crypto space as a whole likes to say is money Legos. We like to think that a lot of the products or the pieces of our puzzle can really be assembled and can also be taken apart in any kind of way. And everyone can kind of assemble that kind of synergy between each of these types of products as they wish. So for example, as you can see, potentially a Genopest product that has this type of move to earn or location tracking kind of services could actually collaborate with High Street, which is a full-on metaverse that maybe allows for other brands. I think I forgot some of the brands, like some of the hotel brands, L'Oreal from like the hairstyling products and things like this, use them for some metaverse display stuff on the enterprise side. And you have something that effectively acts a bit like a lender or buy now, pay later that can work with these on types of e-commerce or other actions that you have. You start to create what I think a lot of other crypto people like to call a parallel economy, where you start to see a lot of these business models really work together, right? You see a buy now, pay later put an ad at H&M or at some sort of store to be able to say, you can afford this pair of shoes, right? And I think that's some of the same type of structuring that we've been starting to do with our own portfolio, as well as with other project teams within the space. So yeah, I guess the last point I wanted was a bit on decentralization. I think, is everyone actually calling in from Singapore? Are you guys still in like back to school yet for the new year, or are you guys still like back home or on holiday?
We just started school today for this semester. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thanks. Yeah, I think there's like maybe three parts of this like decentralization question. I think for Singapore, obviously it's such a safe place as well. And so there's, I would say, generally more trust in structures around the world in Singapore than in the rest of the world. One of the beauties of crypto today is that you can work with people in a very remote first sense. So for Impossible, we actually have, I think, about 25-ish teammates, but actually based in 14 countries, 14, which is probably the most I've ever seen in terms of ratio. Like we don't even have 2 people per country for a lot of the countries that we have. And I think that's something that's kind of beautiful, because it means that I can tap into a lot of talent to build things in a startup that really scale beyond just my own friend network or skill set. It's not just my past colleagues, though we do have like 4 or 5 from ex-Binance teammates as well that we brought along together, but that a lot of it has been brand new people that we've been able to kind of see and that were contributing. And I think 2 of our teammates actually came from the community. So they actually used our product and then said, I want to join this company. So I think that's kind of a different level of passion that, to be honest, like looking back, I don't think I'll ever be able to do a like regular job, quote unquote, because I don't think I can live without that feeling with everyone else on the team that this baby is ours, this product, this startup is all something that we've created. And I think that's something that makes me tick quite a bit. And so for this like kind of general decentralization topic, decentralization sometimes means scale, and sometimes it actually slows down scale as well. In some way, as you can see, when you have a lot of people digitally separate, like it's even hard for me to get some of you guys to volunteer the questions to answer in the chat here, right? Communication is not easy when you're not in person, right? In person, someone can just yell at you and be like, hey, can you do this, right? Whereas when you're not in person, it's obviously a lot tougher. Even stuff like turning on cameras for the like any type of video call, like our team, I'm really bad at this sometimes too. So sometimes my team's like, Calvin, turn on my camera, right? And I'm like, yeah, fine. It's early morning, my hair's a mess, but I'll do it, right? But I think that's where for us, to be able to long-term build in, I would say, 21st century, we should be able to build a lot more things fully remote. And I think a lot of crypto product teams by default are able to do this because in their first place, their token holders, their community, they need to cover a lot of people. Russia is actually one of the largest user audiences on Impossible, and I've never been to Russia. And I think Turkey is also in the top 4. Also, have never been in Turkey. But that our product was able to scale there. And if I don't have somebody in these countries that represent these communities for us, then to be honest, I'm not going to do a best job to be the best builder for these ecosystems, right? And that's something that I'm really happy to see, because I think I've seen a lot of the traditional finance like kind of world, and I realized how friction filled a lot of the regular world is. So as an American, you know, whether it's taxes or other things, that's a different story. But in terms of having lived in Japan and China for a lot of my time at Binance, and not being able to set up some of these like online payments apps and things like that, just because I didn't have a local identity card, was probably one of the most headache kind of inducing things I ever saw, and made me lose a lot of faith and trust in a lot of how businesses work in the real world. But that in terms of maybe a less like doomsday type of kind of statement, one of the cool things in learning a lot about all these places is that when you have a decentralized team, you really do get to have a way different perspective on things and be able to solve a lot more problems that maybe you never kind of assumed. For example, our teammate in Russia, like he was telling me like they still don't have McDonald's, like it's like tasty and I like it or something, like because of sanctions. I tried to buy him a MacBook because he's one of our data analysts, so he writes a lot of SQL and other kind of data, and he's not allowed to use the newest MacBooks. Apple has placed sanctions for I think 2 or 3 years, so you guys probably know like there's like the M2 chip already for Macs. He can't even buy M1s in the actual stores. He has to buy a bootleg off of some random dealer on some random website. That's the world that we live in. And that's unfortunately how a lot of the most talented people were. I think he was actually pursuing a physics PhD before he dropped out to join Impossible. He's not even allowed to get some of the best tools that would make him a better builder, right? And I think that's kind of the exciting thing that I get to kind of see as a real pain point of real people that don't get to live the comfortable lives that maybe you or I get to have. One of my other research teammates is actually an Argentinian professor. He told us that in Argentina, there's actually 13 exchange rates. So like if you're buying like food, you get like a discount, or like he said, like if you use the government card, you get like some percent off on Tuesdays or something. So all the elderly only buy groceries on Tuesdays, and all this kind of complex math where a lot of people don't live in a world that has a stable currency and a good economy to be able to not have to worry about these things. And that's something that I think is really worth building for. And that's kind of what gets me excited when I wake up in the morning to know that my products can allow some random guy from Russia or some random guy from Argentina or whatever, where Apple can't even sell something or McDonald's can't sell something to them. I can. And that's I think the kind of cool thing that I don't think I'll be able to ever say anything else that I can do that McDonald's or Apple can't do. But yeah, I guess that's kind of basically it for me. I hogged the mic obviously, but definitely want to hear more from you guys, and happy to answer any other questions that you guys might have.
Okay, so thank you so much, Calvin, for sharing more about your previous projects of Impossible Finance, your experience with investments, tokens, and Launchpads. So I believe it was such a fulfilling session for all of us here. So since we have a bit of time left, we would like to move on to the Q&A session. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute or type down your questions to ask Calvin.
One more interactive question from me. What are all of you guys studying? Are any of you guys not studying finance, actually? Feel free to throw it in the chat as well. Right. I guess we have one question from Jin. Thanks for the question. Yeah, in terms of like next iteration of launches. So there's kind of two questions, right? So my dad actually is a professor, and is actually quite interesting because when I was a kid, if he taught classes that weren't interesting to him, he'd have less students that were, he might have more students that were interested in enrolling, but it was less fulfilling for him. But he was actually paid by how many students signed up for his classes. So I think it's actually a very similar type of like economic problem, in that for us in launching project teams, sometimes we actually can't launch the things that we geek out about or love, because if no one sits in the classroom, the university doesn't make money, right? So for us, some of what we're seeing with regards to kind of the sectors and other stuff, sometimes we have to be very honest with ourselves and start to really get ahead of what these trends might be, because we can't, it's like a three-dimensional problem. We can't even think about only what will fill the seats, but what will fill the seats tomorrow. Because a lot of the work we do is trying to help these project teams 3 months, 6 months, or a year ahead of when they're ready to launch a token. A lot of times it's very difficult to know what will be popular by the time they're ready for this showtime, if you will. So some of what we kind of have to think about, I guess, in terms of sectors or theses, is a lot more of like these future DeFi products, security, privacy, infrastructure, things that kind of maybe don't go out of style. If we try to chase a trend that's hot now, by the time maybe we've helped a project enough to where we feel comfortable to have them launch a token, they may not be ready yet. So I would say the next kind of iteration is really to sample or better understand what the users are, as well as to figure out what we can do to teach users as well. So Impossible recently rolled out a Impossible Quest product, which I'll send a link to as well, where we do some more kind of interactive questions for people to be able to like test their knowledge on certain things as well, and kind of show whether they know something. Because I think it's quite interesting. If you need to in the real world provide some credentials to prove that you're maybe in a position to make this purchase. Maybe it's like banned things like cigarettes or alcohol, right? You need to have to be at least 18 or something, right? In different different countries, you may have different rules, right? But in some way, I think investments should also have some level of kind of proof that you're eligible in some way. I don't think it should be just purely like age things or other types of restrictions, but rather how can we empower someone that's actually relevant for a specific project to be more eligible to be able to invest in something. That's something I'd be very, very keen to think more about. And I think that will be something that we'll work on. And then the second part of that will be maybe the order of fundraising is something that we'd like to disrupt in this space. Right now, a lot of the VCs in the world you hear about get the kind of best deals. Like this, when I open YouTube, some guy talks about how he 3000x because he was a seed investor in Coinbase. And I was like, but no other regular guy was able to invest in this round to get 3000x because your co-founder for your fund was the founder of Reddit. Of course you got this deal. That's not something you or I could have invested in. So don't try to put that on my YouTube and say that, this guy is a man of the people trying to give people opportunities. Like that guy just got his connections, right? So that's something I think would be really cool if in the next few years we're able to really set this tone or the standard of letting the people, make that statement, make it be heard. Whether it's like all these like kind of short squeezes or things like the Wall Street bets that maybe you guys saw with, things like GameStop last year and things like that. And if it's actually channeled into something that I think is fundamentally legit, which I think a lot of the crypto projects that we see in the space, and hopefully all of the projects that we work with are legit. If that same type of community ownership is channeled into valuable things, I think that will be the next kind of evolution of what we think launches will be. Going into Leonard's question a bit here, I think one of the things that is difficult is how to keep value or revenue, because a lot of people see like investments as like only now, but realistically, like you should be convinced enough in any of the theses or things that you invest in that you hold on to these investments, right? So in terms of like building a roadmap or plan, this is definitely some of what we focus a lot on for all these types of projects. But I think that fundamentally the most important thing is assessing team ahead of even making a decision to work with a product team is actually the most important thing. My girlfriend didn't get angry at me because I had a meeting yesterday on Sunday evening, so I didn't take her to dinner or anything, right? But as a founder, right, part of the reason why other people wanted to invest in Impossible was they knew that I care so much about this project that I'm willing to sacrifice weekends, that I'm willing to spend whatever time it is, get up at odd hours to get shit done. And I think that that's the cheap answer of like finding a team that you believe in first is the best chance to avoid having a rug. Because also a very legit founder can also fail at the things that they do, right? Maybe some people have heard about like tokenizing real estate or other types of things. And some sectors are very, very regulation driven, and you could be a great founder, but maybe the product fails to survive because your country banned the ability to put something on chain, right? And so I would say that a lot of the work and heavy lifting is actually first figuring out what is your specialty or what is your calling card. For me, being able to say that while I was at Binance, the average project that I got to due diligence on Binance.com brought an average return for users of north of 400x, I believe was the number. It was something so crazy that I almost never say it out loud because people will question how legit I am when I say this type of number. What type of person ever has had a track record of 400x that they didn't get to invest in? I wasn't allowed to invest on the platform itself because I was on the team. But what people have actually made 400x for others, that was something that was a bit of like, I guess, my track record, and something that allowed me to be able to have a lot of flexibility and freedom to build the roadmap that I want for Impossible and for the rest of the team to build, because people felt confident that we could figure out more ways of different synergies or ideas for all the projects that we work with. And so a lot of that is on first planning and understanding why we think this thing maybe needs to exist. And then from there, just being very open-minded to try and work with as many other teams in the space, whether it's games or, like I mentioned, with the co-launching with other exchanges as well, that we see a lot of these collaborations, partnerships, and synergies as ways to build up more kind of items for people to know that you're not just kind of taking the money and running, you're actually doing stuff. And so being very purposeful in what you kind of share in building stuff for each project is something that we also spend a lot of time in, to make sure that sometimes the loudest voice is not from yourself. Retweeting that you have the best performance or you have the best throughput or whatever maybe isn't the most beautiful thing. And so being able to find other partners as well, for example, that share some of the successes that you've made on your roadmap that you design with us, is something that we also spend a lot of time in, to work with other media, content platforms, info platforms, research platforms to share these successes. Happy to dive more on this one later. Some really good questions here. For Hash, for fresh grads, I think a lot of places are hiring. If you guys want to send me CVs, I'm happy to send them out to our incubated projects as well. So we can definitely follow up for that via email from some of the rest of the organizers here. In terms of kind of advice, I would say just have to learn and have to read. I use Twitter a lot. I do think crypto Twitter is one of the most useful things ever. So if I have like one suggestion that I would say, you kind of have no excuse, even as a novice, to not learn everything that I learned starting from today. You might not know about all of the kind of work experience that I had over the last maybe 5 years in crypto, but you don't have an excuse anymore, because my follower list on Twitter is everyone I talk to in crypto. You can go and follow the same 5,000 people that I follow, and it's very public out there. And if you follow all those 5,000 people, at least from Twitter, there's not a single piece of information that you don't have access to as someone that's brand new to crypto. And that was part of the reason why I wanted to join crypto in the first place, because I knew that even though I was a young kid that just graduated, there was only so many people that had a couple of years of work experience ahead of me, but I knew that it was a quote unquote fair game for me to try and go and learn about everything that was possible to be learned about in the upcoming years to come. So I just want to put my link of my Twitter there as well, in case you guys want to take a look at it. I think it's 5,000 people. You don't need to follow all of them, of course, but I think it's already a pretty good filter of a lot of the people that talk in crypto today that you can learn from. So I would say that that's probably my way of trying to solve being a bit more crypto native, reading as much stuff as possible, and then kind of going from there. I guess 2 last questions from Edison and Jin. So for Edison, appreciate this question on the differentiation. The first is that we do have actually a staking mechanism where actually a lot of other people do these like sweepstakes or other types of things where it's a bit dodgy how they know whether or not like someone's eligible for a sale. It's a bit similar to like in the real world where maybe you see people line up for phones or sneakers or new releases. Some of them try to do like first come, first serve so that you get this kind of FOMO because you see all these guys waiting in line outside. But is it really fundamentally fair that like, you know, some guy might be squatting a spot there and then selling it to some other guy, or that all these guys are waiting in line just to resell the item? That's something that I think a lot of other platforms kind of encourage or design by design kind of do. And so for us, that would be one. The second is the amount of time that we work with project teams. Most of the time we are advisors. I think we were advisors to 15 of the 16 launches that we've done so far since inception. So in some way, a lot of other teams, they just charge a flat fee to fundraise. So in a way, they just kind of want to do more sales. So some of them do like 100 sales. They don't care about the quality. They just make money right away up front. For us, impossible, maybe the hard part, and probably where someday I'll look back and I'll say, maybe we didn't do the best thing, but we did the right thing. We don't charge a lot of anything basically upfront. So from these 16 deals, actually, we collected nothing upfront. We're all in on the project team. We act just like an early stage team member of these project teams and have some advisory shares to represent that. And that changes the game of whether or not we're thinking about this as a next person in line kind of thing, or can we create something that actually creates value for these platforms and projects, because that's what will allow us to make the most money in the long run. Yeah, and then I guess the last question from Jin. Yes, we do a lot of on-chain analytics. Really proud to say that doing analytics was actually one of our earliest investments at Binance. So got to meet the team when they were actually just 2 people. That would be one other question, Hash, if you wanted to do more things to show that you've learned a lot about crypto. I think using Dune Analytics and other platforms like this is really, really powerful. Impossible actually makes a lot of our data open source, so you can actually check all of our user data, for example, and you can search a lot about some of these other protocols as well, to be able to try and understand more about their current user bases, what chains they're on, things like that. And so for us, all of our data is pretty out there. I think you can kind of find out exactly like how many users used our product yesterday, right, for a DAU number and things like this. So you know, that's something I'm pretty proud of being able to kind of show. And we do spend a lot of time on these types of data information for project teams that are live. But then also for project teams that are not yet live yet, then yes, we do need to rely a lot more on fundamental work. So yeah, that's, I guess, it from me. I do unfortunately have another meeting, but I guess really appreciate all of your guys' questions. I am on Twitter at the link that I sent as well. So if you guys have more questions, you guys can feel free to message me as well. And yeah, I think just really want to thank all of you guys for sticking around for the whole hour plus. And also thanks so much for all of our organizers today that have been able to help put this together. It was really fun to share more with all of you guys.
Thank you so much, Calvin, for responding to all of the questions, and everyone for attending this workshop. I hope you guys learned a lot from this session. So Calvin, I heard you have a meeting, so you can go ahead. Yep. Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great one, guys.
Thank you.